Hello everyone, another topic. I used to be interested in geodes and other interesting stones. When I was looking at them recently, one of them caught my attention. It seems to be a small, petrified hailstone that has calcified over time. It is shaped like a regular hailstone, and you can even see the core. But let's go to Argentina. In older videos, I mistakenly mentioned that this area is in Bolivia. It is actually in Argentina. But we are still focusing on the Andes, which cut through several countries, and the findings here are the most shocking. The finds have been preserved here partly due to the inaccessibility of the terrain and probably also due to the very dry climate. But you also need to know what to look for. First, we should talk about the history of this mine. The Jujuy region, where Salar de Olaroz is located, is a vast plateau with many salt flats. It is no coincidence that these salt flats are used for mining, as we will recall later. A mine project to mine lithium and other minerals was approved in 2012. The mine operator's official explanation for the lithium mining process is that holes are drilled into the salt flats and the brine is pumped into evaporation tanks in so-called limestone stations. These stations are in the shape of concentric circles in the Salar de Olaroz and extend southwards. From this point on, disagreements arise between the original indigenous population and the mine operators. The indigenous economy is based on raising livestock, especially llamas, which need pasture and water. Local residents are concerned about the decline in water levels in the landscape, and the loss of pastures and the decline in the number of llamas is already evident. Furthermore, local residents are concerned about the fate of the local wetlands. The operator of the Salar de Olaroz mine argues that it obtains water from a glacier on Mount Coyamboy, but this is nonsense. As we have seen many times before, after the topsoil is exposed, limestone appears in these geometric areas. By breaking through the limestone, a reservoir of water is created, containing the water that was already there. This is also why some limestone areas sink due to erosion. It is probably in the interest of the mine operator to keep the fact that there is a huge amount of water deep beneath the driest area in the world out of public view, as well as the fact that the evaporation pools are part of a much more complicated structure. Native people, especially Indians, revered such places, while modern Western civilization is literally plundering these areas. The surrounding pastures and wetlands are threatened not by water loss, but by salt dust carried far and wide by the wind. But if it weren't for our desperate need for lithium for electronics today, we might never have discovered what the Bible really meant. And that's also a possible reason why lithium mines like these are being quietly passed around. As for the alleged glacier, I don't think that huge amounts of water came from a single glacier. Let's look at the geology of this mountainous area. This plateau is bordered on the west by a volcanic front and on the east by a tectonic front. According to scientists, the salt basins here are formed due to the climate and the closure of the basin by stratovolcanic mountains, which is another nonsense. The Coimboy Glacier should lie in these places, but we are looking at a volcano again. I would really like to know where the Silver Peak lithium mine in Nevada, for example, gets its gigantic amount of water from. That was an academic question. The name Nevada could be translated as Ni Vada, which is from the Slavic language and means there is no water here. The Salar de Olaroz mining area is experiencing subsidence, especially around the drilling rigs. This is likely due to a drop in pressure of the groundwater containing brine. If you want to search here yourself, it might be a pretty good puzzle. You need to use the timeline, and not only that. The trick here is that when you zoom in on this area, most of the detailed images disappear from the timeline, and you won't see anything. You need to zoom out virtually, and images from different data periods will appear on the timeline. Try clicking on any year and then zoom in for details. Only then will the image not be overlaid. The ideal year is 2015, where it is most visible, and you can compare the images with images after 2020. You need to try it patiently. It is likely that I am wrong in some respects, and this is a space for you to think for yourself about what we will look at. Write your findings and observations to me in the comments. We are now in 2015 on the timeline and will go through the most interesting areas. Here is a detail of the circular structure, which is obscured on this timeline, but we won't be interested in the circle for now. We will search this area to the east, because everything of the construction was swept away in that direction. The devastation came from the west, as we will show later. Now we will look at one of the many slabs that were originally located on the supporting structure higher up to the west. This slab still rests on the torn beams. The beam at the top of the picture is very well preserved. But that's not all. There were cities on these plates. Let's take a closer look. Unfortunately, the pictures from this period are not very good, so I'll try to highlight some of them. We look at geometric shapes and the tangle of paths. Everything looks like it's been ironed and set in stone. Wow, look here. Angles appear here and the area is blackened, as if asphalt had been spilled there. These were all very likely buildings. It doesn't even remotely resemble a city anymore. Look at this beam that runs through this area. It was originally under a slab, but the slab probably caved in because of the great heat. One version of the Bible literally says that the cities of the kings caved in. Kings are supposed to be rulers. today kings or presidents. Here, the beam connects to other debris of the supporting structure. How could this happen? The tsunami and subsequent heat are primarily responsible for this devastation. The heat melted all the glass that contains potash, i.e., potassium carbonate, which is also found here. All the iron and steel structures melted and the buildings collapsed. Today we only see some geometric stone shapes. From the metal structures today we have lithium. This means that there must have been still strong radioactivity here. Radioactivity is measurable on all the salt flats, not just in the Andes. The plates were tearing apart, and everything was moving on molten rock that used to be water. Remember what we said about the petrification of water? And do you remember where biblical salt comes from? Let's leave this place for a moment and look at the cause of this disaster. I'll rotate the image to make it easier to see. We have the Andes, which run from north to south. Then there's the west coast, which is mostly dry. The coasts of Chile and Peru have been devastated, as I'll show you later sometime in the another video. Then there's the central and eastern part of the South American continent, where there are plates. Tectonic plates, that is, but we can only see them in some areas. What you see is the devastation of a huge tsunami. The water at a certain altitude petrified, swept away part of the coast of Chile and Peru, and lifted the entire supporting structure in that area. The enormous pressure of the water tore that structure apart. One fragment that drifted 2,500 miles out into the ocean is Easter Island. Many other pieces of debris have become part of the seabed. And on Easter Island, we have one clue in the form of Moai statues. Moai statues are scattered throughout the island, but most are found on the eastern side of the island. Here is one row of these statues. You can see that they lie in a straight line almost east and west. Let's take a look at them. We look at their backs. The statue's gaze is directed towards the west. With a bit of exaggeration, we can say that they are turning their backs to the South American continent. Or is it different? Or are they looking west because the entire island has shifted west? But there is a third option. Some of these Moai statues have spirals on their backs. These spirals can be seen in the Andes, especially above the Nazca Plain. and of course, petrified tsunami waves. So what do these statues represent? The gods who sent tsunamis around the world, causing the biblical flood? Were they giants? The Bible mentions giants and calls them Nephilim. The problem is that the word Nephilim is the plural of the word Nephilos and means cloud. It is very strange that the Bible also mentions the last horseman of the apocalypse, who has gray skin. That is, the color of a cloud. Are these giants responsible for the biblical disasters? The Peruvian Indians who live on Lake Titicaca have a legend about its creation. This lake was supposedly brought to the mountains by a giant cat, that is, a beast. But the Bible also mentions beasts, right? Look at this. They are slabs, and the image is very plastic. They look like they are flying through the air, but they were probably swept away by a huge wave when everything suddenly turned to stone. The Atacama Desert is about 150 million years old and is the driest place on Earth. In 2010, workers found the complete skeletons of about 40 whales, including calves, while building a road in Cerro Balena. Among them were other extinct animals such as dolphins, seals, and water sloths that lived about 6 to 9 million years ago. This period falls into the Miocene. What is strange is that the whales were lying at a depth of 2.5 to 7 meters, all on their backs and orthogonally. That is, they were twisted, as if resisting some current. These whales died and decomposed naturally, but fossilized crabs have also been found here. Although mainstream science attributes such deaths to toxic algae, it is strange that crabs have also been petrified by this toxicity. But let's put the sarcasm aside and look at it from the other side. The distance of the find is more than 40 miles from the current coast. The Andes are located at the top of the image, and as we have seen, fossilized waves and other artifacts are found here. In my opinion, and I could be wrong, these aquatic animals were brought by the tsunami. The heavier pieces of the wave simply fell out, died, and decomposed naturally. The wave carried the lighter fauna, such as crabs, fish, and the like, to a certain altitude where they petrified. This is also perhaps the reason why we do not find such large petrified animals. Could this be evidence of petrification of water on the planet at higher altitudes? But what is this dating? Miocene? Thoth mentions the long-buried Atlantis in texts supposedly 35,000 years old. By the word long ago, we can imagine any timeline. But there's something else. High levels of radioactive radiation were affecting the Earth. Is it possible that this catastrophe was preceded by a nuclear Armageddon? In this case, all studies of the age of artifacts using the radiocarbon dating method are irrelevant. At dramatically increased levels of radiation, the decay of atoms of the radiocarbon isotope increases dramatically. This means that the object under study is actually much younger. And it is thanks to this radiation that we can use lithium batteries in our smartphones and other electronics today. But now we will finally continue in Salar de Olaroz. I hope this information was useful for you. If you have any questions or information to add, write in the comments. Let's take a look around this work of destruction. Again, we see a supporting beam that runs through the collapsed city. The beam is broken in these places. However, there are strange objects in the vicinity. They are arranged in rows, and in detail they look like drops of mercury. What is this? It could be some joints or places where beams have been torn out. And here again we are looking at dark areas that likely indicate the presence of molten asphalt. Twig-like formations also appear here, but they could be broken and melted roads. And yet another. Strange connections are found almost throughout this location. Okay, let's look at another broken stone slab. Here it is in somewhat worse condition, but what is on it is more obvious. There are again large blackened fields in the area, and the area is literally crisscrossed with roads. Let's take a closer look. Wow. Maybe we're looking at the streets between the houses. Look at it, all geometric shapes. They are distorted, but that's not what nature does. Do you see how many roads there are? There could have been complex traffic ramps here. If they collapsed due to the intense heat, it would look something like this, one big chaos. There is really something to see here. This area looks amazing too. Of course, it's a disaster, but from a researcher's perspective, it's a treasure, don't you think? There are a lot of blackened areas here, as well as chaotic paths. You won't see it higher up towards the circular structure. Everything has collapsed in that direction. Here it looks like traces of other buildings. They are very close together because everything slid down the molten mountain. Do you see those huge blackened puddles and the paths in them? Here's something that's literally sunk into the rock. It's almost impossible to see. I'll try to make the image more prominent. Another probable stone slab appears to be here, but there is nothing on it anymore. Again, it is surrounded by blackness. If any of you have an idea what it could be, please leave your opinion in the comments. For this moment, I say goodbye to you, and we will meet again in Salar de Olaroz next time. And don't forget that our lives here are just a theater, a game. Therefore, approach life with optimism and love. Have beautiful sunny days.
Check it out.